Welcome to the 6th Plymouth District Candidate Forum for State Representative. I'm Julie Thompson, Executive Director of PAC TV, and I'm joined by Amy Naples, the Executive Director of the Plymouth Area Chamber of Commerce. We want to take a moment to thank our candidates for participating in this forum and bringing this informational programming to residents and voters this election season.
Let me explain the format. Tonight, the two candidates for state representative for the 6th Plymouth District, incumbent Representative Josh Cutler and Ken Sweezy, will be participating. Each candidate will be introduced in alphabetical order. They will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves and speak about who they are and why they're running for this elected office, as well as describing their qualifications for the position.
The candidates will then be asked a series of questions related to state and local issues. They will have up to 3 minutes to answer each question. After, there may be a post-response, a point-counterpoint, if you will, where the candidates can interact with each other with the time determined by the moderators. Candidates will be hearing the questions for the first time and will not receive coaching or information to assist in answering. They appear alone in the studio, and members of their campaign staff are not present in the room.
The forum will close with each candidate having the opportunity to address any topic not covered or revisit an issue. These remarks will also be held to a 3-minute time frame.
This will not be a debate per se, but rather an opportunity for the candidates to let voters know who they are and where they stand on certain issues.
Thank you. Ready to begin? We will start with opening statements. Representative Cutler, you are up first and will have 2 minutes.
Great. Great. Thank you very much, PAC TV, Julie and Amy, and thank you, Mr. Sweezy, for being here. So my name is Josh Cutler. I'm the current state representative for the 6th Plymouth District, which includes all or parts of Duxbury, Halifax, Hanson, Pembroke, and Marshfield. My background, just very briefly, is I'm originally from the town of Duxbury. I ran a small family business for about 10 years. I served in local government. I was a member of my planning board, Board of Selectmen, Alternative Energy Committee. I have a law degree from Suffolk University, also a master's degree in political policy from University of Massachusetts. I'm active with the Hanson Kiwanis Foundation and the Duxbury Free Library Inc. Board. My hobbies included enjoying photography and local history. In fact, in my spare time, I've written a couple of books on local history. So I'm currently in my 5th term in the House of Representatives. I'm the chairman of the Joint Committee on Labor and Workforce Development. I'm also the co-chair of the Future of Work Commission, the Coastal Caucus, and the Blockchain Technology Caucus. I truly love my job representing the residents of this district. First and foremost, this is a job about constituent service, helping people. I have a great team, and we work hard to serve all the residents of our district and solve problems. One of the things I'm most proud of this term, one of the accolades I received, was the Thomas Menino Award for Public Service for my work helping people with disabilities. To me, that is the essence of what this role is all about, helping people who need a voice. Massachusetts has a lot to be proud of. We lead the nation in many areas: education, healthcare, renewable energy. This term, we've taken major steps forward on a number of fronts, including mental health, workforce development, childcare, and economic development. There's still more to do, of course, and that's what motivates me today. I look forward to a great discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Sweezy, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Yeah, I want to repeat the sentiment. Thank you to everybody here at PAC TV for hosting. It's really important to get this information out to viewers. Thank you to Julie and Amy and Representative Cutler as well. So as well, just a little bit about me. As mentioned, my name is Ken Sweezy, a Republican candidate for state rep in November. I grew up and currently live over in Hanson in the district. My family owns and operates a small business now for over 50 years in the adjacent town of Whitman. I spent many summers as I grew up, just digging holes in the heat and learning the value of a hard day's work and the value of a dollar, which I think is a very important thing to learn as a young man or young person in general. From there, I went on to earn my bachelor's degree in forensic science from Loyola University, Chicago. That was a great experience as well and was the springboard into my career as in law enforcement. I was a fingerprint expert with the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, one of the top 5 most violent cities in America. That was an experience that was truly humbling and the highlight of my professional career to date. I served alongside so many incredible public servants, both sworn and civilian, many, many brave men and women in blue. After the start of the pandemic, I think as many people did, I began to reflect and see and ask myself, what more could I do? As violent crime skyrocketed and many issues, my family business being negatively affected and so many people being negatively affected, I felt I wasn't doing enough. I joined the private sector at that point and looked how I could get involved on a volunteer basis. I was appointed over a year ago to the committees for economic development and capital improvements for the town of Hanson, and have also had the privilege to serve alongside many dedicated volunteers and learning all the amazing work that is done at the municipal government level. I look forward to talking more about how this real life experience, not just having an office, is able to make you the best candidate for the job, and I look forward to covering a lot of important issues during this forum.
Thank you. We will now move on to our first question, which involves a couple of the questions on November's ballot. I'm going to ask you about 2 of these questions separately. You'll have up to 2 minutes to answer each part. First, ballot question 1 is a proposed amendment to the state constitution and would be an additional tax on income over $1 million. Can you explain the ballot question, why it is or isn't needed, and your position on it? Mr. Sweezy, you're going to have 2 minutes and you will go first.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. This is an incredibly important ballot question, as they all are. But it's very important to understand what the ballot question is asking. This is an amendment to the Constitution. This is not merely a way for citizens to weigh in on the issue. This will amend the Constitution so that going forward, the legislature could enact more and multiple changes in the future. What this is going to create a negative impact on our economy going forward. And that is something that we cannot afford as the nation slides into recession. Make no mistake about it, the economy is not getting better, it is getting worse. You don't need me to explain that to you. You feel it every single day. There is no excuse right now to be raising any sorts of taxes. The state of Massachusetts is operating with billions of dollars of surplus. And the numbers for the first quarter, fiscal year 23, have come out, and we are again over 5% ahead of projections. The state is taking in more money than it knows what to do with, and it is still trying to jam tax increases down your throat. Now, they will say that this is an amendment just to target the rich, the 1%, whatever it may be, but as a matter of fact, it is going to affect everybody. Business owners, seniors, people that sell their homes or cash out retirement savings, all of that can be put towards this $1 million surtax. We cannot afford it. Massachusetts cannot afford it. Families cannot afford it. That's why I personally am opposed. I would ask you as well to vote no on this question. And thank you.
Okay, same question to Representative Cutler.
Great, thank you all. So first part, what is it? So question 1 is also known as a fair share amendment. And it's a ballot question that would make our state income tax more progressive. It may sound complicated, but it's actually pretty straightforward. If your income is $1 million or less, nothing changes. You still would pay the same flat 5% state income tax that you pay today. If your income is greater than $1 million, then you would pay an additional 4% just on the amount in excess. In other words, you're only paying on your second million, or 4 cents more on each dollar above $1 million. This additional money would be designated for transportation and public education, and the $1 million threshold is indexed over time, so that it would always apply only to those at the highest level of earnings. So I'm for it. Why do I think we need it? Well, obviously we need the revenue for roads, bridges, public transportation, schools, including our public colleges and VOTEC schools. The majority of states, 34 other states, have some form of progressive income tax code. Those who can best afford it pay a little bit more, when that reduces the overall tax burden on the middle class. Our state revenues are positive now, but that's not always going to be the case, and we need to take the long view here. And I just want to mention, because I know it comes up commonly, because I get a lot of questions when I go to my local senior centers about this. When you're talking about if you're running a business, and I ran a business for 10 years, and so I'm very familiar with this, this income applies only to your profit, not your revenue. So that's an important distinction to know when you're talking about selling a business, or if you run an S corporation or other type of pass-through business. It's only affecting your profit, not the revenue. And the same goes for real estate. If you were to sell your house, it only applies to the capital gain, not the sales price. I think there's some confusion about that, and those are important distinctions. So for all those reasons, and because it will be going to some very important vital uses that will come back to our cities and towns, I'm voting yes, and I hope you will too. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sweezy, would you like to do a rebuttal for a minute?
Yeah, just really
Okay.
briefly, I would like to point out multiple newspapers and experts have refuted the fact that this money will actually be able to be earmarked for infrastructure and education, so I think that's a very important point. Many people are discussing that. This also doesn't prevent the legislator from, any particular legislator from putting in to raise it the 4% or change it to a different income level in the future. There's nothing barring them from doing that. So to say that it is only affecting people over the $1 million is just not really able to be proven. That's not necessarily true. And with all taxes, it is always going to come down and affect everyone. And of course, you know, the middle class is going to be the one consuming goods from these businesses that are going to be feeling this tax, and those are always going to be passed down to the consumer. So please consider your vote on this ballot question.
And a rebuttal.
Sure, yeah, so I think everyone's entitled to their own views on this. I respect my opponent's differing view on this, but I think, you know, the facts of it are black and white. You can read the amendment and you can see for yourself. And if there were to be some subsequent attempt to change the tax, that would have to go through the same process this is going through now. Multiple sessions of the legislature, a ballot question before the voter. So I think, you know, the process is pretty clear. Those at the very top will pay a little bit more. Unless you're making over $1 million, though, you're not affected. And I think that's, you know, the bottom line. And I hope folks will just do their own research and come to their own conclusions.
Okay, thank you. Ballot question number 4 is eligibility for driver's licenses. Can you explain what the ballot question is, why it is or isn't needed, and your position on it? Representative Cutler, we're going to start with you, and you have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. So ballot question number 4 allows qualified drivers who can provide proof of identity to apply for a Massachusetts state driver's license, regardless of their immigration status. We're all safer if everybody on our roads is tested, licensed, and insured. All applicants would still be required to show proof of identification, date of birth, and state residency, including a valid passport. Also, they would have to meet all the other eligibility requirements, including passing a road test, an eye test, and paying license fees. Now, we know there are about 200,000 undocumented residents living here in Massachusetts, including some in our district. Making sure that everyone on our roads has valid identification also enables police to better identify drivers and has been shown to reduce the incidence of hit and runs. This ballot question is not the same as the legislation that was pending in past sessions. It has much stronger identification requirements, including requiring a passport and a secondary form of identification. That's one reason why the state's top law enforcement organizations are all in support of it. That includes the Massachusetts District Attorneys Association, the Massachusetts Major Cities Chiefs of Police, the majority of our sheriffs, and our Attorney General. Now, I think it's important, I know the issue of voting often comes up when we're discussing this, and I think that is a red herring. The legislation specifically includes provision that instructs the Registry of Motor Vehicles that any unauthorized immigrants may not be participating in the automatic voter registration law. There was a report by Tufts University, their Center for State Policy Analysis, a nonpartisan, non-ideological research center that just came out this week. In fact, they said, I'm going to quote from it while I have a moment, state-issued driver's licenses would not alter people's immigration status or expand access to other benefits, end quote. So the bottom line is driver's licenses are a safety tool. A yes vote makes our roads safer. Thank you.
Mr. Sweezy, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Ballot question number 4 is eligibility for driver's licenses. Can you explain the ballot question, why it is or isn't needed, and your position on it? You have 2 minutes.
Absolutely. So I think Representative Cutler did a good job explaining the amendment, so I'm not going to take my time doing that again. But there's a couple points that I'd like to refute and talk about what he brought up. Mr. Cutler is parting with Governor Baker on this. Governor Baker vetoed this bill even after bringing concerns about voting to the legislature and wanting to work with them on this. They did not meet his needs. They did not meet the threshold for what he wanted to see to assure. He flat out said that there are serious concerns about the voting issue, voter security, and that is, of course, paramount to, the faith and trust of our elections. So that, of course, is a big focus. Representative Cutler also talks about the major chiefs of police, which our district departments are not members of. If I've been out, I've talked to many officers, many people in the communities, the chiefs of police in this district. They don't want this. I understand the identification piece. These are, to be clear, these passports and documents he's referring to are foreign documents in foreign languages often. They are not U.S. documents. So Governor Baker's biggest concern is that the RMV is just not the appropriate place to deal with this issue. If we want to have a discussion truly about making sure that, they will often cite making sure, people can get to work, get their kids to school, I believe that they should be able to do so safely, and we should prevent hit and runs and accidents on the road. As far as the insurance piece, you don't need insurance to get a driver's license. You will be tested. You will make sure that you are able to drive in Massachusetts, but getting insurance is a piece of registering your vehicle. So immigrant or not, you do not need to register your vehicle to get a license. So if you want to talk about, not completely factual or red herring issues, that is not something that is necessarily going to come. Those are correlated, but they are not caused by one another.
Would you like a minute to rebut?
No, I mean, I think we have a genuine difference of opinion on this. So.
Okay.
We move now to our second question. Water is a precious commodity for our community. Given the recent droughts, which have limited our water use, and the safety of our water, which is an ongoing concern, the subject of water is front and center. With this in mind, is it important to look at the value of water through the lens of health and availability to all, or to look at water in terms of its role in economic development? We will start with Mr. Sweezy, and you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you for this question. I appreciate the extra time on this because this is such an important issue, especially here in the 6th Plymouth. I appreciate that we have the time to talk about it. I'm going to talk quickly about 3 things related to water. Number 1 is PFAS chemicals. This is going to be arguably our number 1 environmental issue going forward. This is something that I believe the state must take a leading role in. It is not fair, as with many issues and unfunded mandates and regulation, the state will often kick the can down the road and kick it over to our municipalities that are not financially able to deal with some of these issues, especially environmental ones. PFAS chemicals, for those that don't know, are harmful chemicals that are being found all over the Commonwealth in drinking water. As a side issue, it's also causing a lot of diseases within firefighters with their equipment and their foams that they use to fight fires, but that's a separate issue that we must address for them as well. For example, the town of Duxbury had to close a well because they were over the parts per million of PFAS chemicals in their water. I believe they just spent nearly $2 million on a carbon filtration system, and that is not fair that these towns who are trying to fund our police, fund our schools, are being left with that burden. The state, when you are making a regulation, say you cannot drink water over this level, we must be there as the representatives to advocate for our towns and municipalities in this district to make sure they are able to drink their water. Of course, no representative, the government doesn't control the water, and as mentioned, Amy, we did face some pretty serious drought conditions. And now the state as well needs to be there to help them out. That's connected to another piece, which is infrastructure. We need to make sure that cities and towns, particularly the towns in the 6th Plymouth here, have the water they need. I mean, there were literally businesses that closed for a week this summer because they were unable to get water. Restaurants could not serve food safely because they did not have water. In 2022 in Massachusetts, that is inexcusable. We must be able to help them out. And if private citizens don't have water, whether it's Mbta or another organization that's able to provide bottled water and be there on the ground to help them out, these are issues that need to be addressed immediately, because if droughts that cannot be planned continue to occur in our area, we must make sure that they are there to be assisted. And the last piece is infrastructure. Even if we have the water, even if it's being pumped at the right rate, and if there's no PFAS in it, if the infrastructure fails, whether with breaks or old pipes, oftentimes in Hanson, once or twice a year, people report brown water coming out of their faucets. So even if we do the work on the front end to make sure that it's safe to drink and that, with drought conditions, you're being supported in the municipalities, if it's not drinkable when it comes out of the faucet, it's no good to us either. So we must support water infrastructure, in particular in our district, to make sure that they are supported. Because again, these are one-time costs that the towns simply cannot afford to fund all of the other issues that they are held for responsible for administrating. So those are the things where the state and the legislature has fallen short, and I promise to make them a priority going forward.
Thank you. And Representative Cutler, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I got it. And I agree with everything except the last sentence that my opponent said. To answer your question directly, Amy, I think we have to see this through both a public health and an economic lens. I think, obviously we often take water for granted until it's not there for us. And the drought, we were in a level 2 severe drought up until actually yesterday when it was changed to a level 1, which is at least some good news. And we need a comprehensive strategy for water management that includes both looking at water infrastructure and also usage. And there's a lot that's already been done, and I just want to quickly highlight a few of the things, both at a statewide level and at a local level. Number one, I was proud to be the lead sponsor and help to pass the Energy Save Act, which expanded the use of WaterSense products to boost water efficiency. We know that efficiency standards ensure that products use less water and energy and save money and protect public health. Our budget last year included a task force on PFAS, we know is forever chemicals for the same reasons my opponent was talking about, and I agree with him 100% on that. In May of this past year, we worked with the Baker administration to announce a $1.3 billion loan and grant fund to fund wastewater and drinking water local infrastructure projects using both state revenues but also revenues from the bipartisan infrastructure law passed by Congress. So those are some of the some of the examples of action at the state level. But we've also been doing a lot locally, and I'm glad that my opponent mentioned that Duxbury, because I was there and we helped to secure $1.8 million for the town of Duxbury that they didn't have to pay. It was not town money for a new carbon filtration system for the Partridge Road well, which will help to bring that well back online and really help with our water management issues in the town of Duxbury. I filed and passed I filed a bill and helped to pass it to help the town of Hanson expedite the digging of a new well site at East Washington and Brooks Street. In Marshfield, we helped secure $1.7 million to help the town replace 2,000 feet of water pipes, plus new catch basin and stormwater management. We revived, working with my colleagues, and a Democrat and Republican, and this is a bipartisan issue, we revived and have funded the Central Plymouth County Water District, which includes towns in this district, including Halifax, Hanson, and Pembroke. I'm proud to be a charter member of the new Southeastern Massachusetts Water Resilience Task Force. And forgive me, I couldn't talk about water without talking about the Holtec issue, because that's a little bit further afield from water use, but we cannot allow Holtec to drop a single drop of radioactive waste water into our bay, and I'm very much committed, along with my colleagues and our partners at the federal level, and the great work that's been done at the local level to prevent that from ever happening. So thank you.
Okay. Any rebuttal?
Yeah, just quickly, I would like
minute?
to say that we do actually agree on the Holtec issue completely. There's no excuse for that water going in there, and every resident of the district is against that. So I appreciate Representative Cutler pointing that out because that is a huge, huge issue going forward as well. Just the point being that during the course of this debate, you obviously heard it here for the first time. My opponent's going to throw a lot of numbers out at you, and I think that we can use this election and this forum as a referendum of all of the really, really high numbers, sounding numbers that he's going to throw out. So I'll just ask you directly if you think the water issue has been addressed by all the numbers he just listed off.
So I guess I'm a little puzzled by that comment. I mean, Duxbury got $1.8 million. You can look it up for a new water carbon filtration system at the Partridge Road well. So that is a number.
All right. The next is our third question. The past 2.5 years have revealed what we already knew, that there are cracks in our healthcare system, especially mental health services. While no one has been untouched, the biggest impact has been on our youth and our seniors. How can you, in an elected position, be most effective in addressing this issue? We're going to begin with Representative Cutler. You will have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Mental health. So this is an important topic. I think if there's sort of one good thing that's come out of the pandemic, it's made this issue of talking about mental health less taboo. I think people are more comfortable talking about mental health and mental health issues in general. And I like to say, when I'm talking about my work, the old adage that it's always easier, changing laws is easier than changing attitudes. And I think attitudes about mental health have been changing. I think it's a very positive thing. But obviously, changing laws needs to happen as well. And we've done a lot of work on this issue in the legislature, and I want to just mention a couple of those things. Number one, this past session, we passed a major mental health bill called the ABC Act. It was Mental Health Addressing Barriers to Care, and I helped to actually write part of this law. This law does a lot of different things, but just some of the highlights. Number one, it creates an online portal to help streamline emergency bed placements. We expand youth mental health wellness services. We provide insurance coverage for annual wellness exams. We all know about going to the doctor once a year to get a checkup, but in the past we didn't always do that for our mental health, and so ensuring that insurance companies will cover that, I think, is an important step to take. We also eliminate insurance company requirements about prior authorization for acute mental health care. And finally, we implement the 988, the national 988 hotline, which provides 24/7 access to crisis care. I helped, as I said, write part of that bill. My amendment that was included in the final version would help to bring more qualified mental health counselors into the workforce in a more timely manner. We've made some other important changes as well. One thing we learned during the pandemic is how successful that telehealth was, and teletherapy or Zoom therapy. And so we made that change permanent. And that has really opened the door for more people to access mental health services and help providers to be able to better position to do that. And so we have permanent rate parity for virtual behavioral health services, which is a really important step that was taken. I'm really proud of my work locally. I mentioned the work I did with mental health clinicians. I was proud to be the Mental Health Counselor Legislator of the Year last term. I helped also to change a state law on parental notification to help parents with loved ones in substance abuse treatment. I was proud this budget cycle to help secure funds to support the Duxbury Facts Coalition, which promotes youth mental wellness, and also to help the nonprofit based out of Hanson, Jay's Hope and Promise, which provides services to those in recovery. So I'm proud of the work we've done. I think we've made a lot of steps forward. Clearly more work needs to be done in this area, and as a parent, this is something that's constantly on my mind, and I'm sure with all those who are watching.
Okay, Mr. Sweezy, would you let me repeat the question?
Please.
Okay. The past 2.5 years have revealed what we already knew, that there are cracks in our healthcare system, especially when it comes to mental health services. While no one has been untouched, the biggest impact has been on our youth and our seniors. How can you, in an elected position, be most effective in addressing this issue? You will have 3 minutes.
Absolutely. Thank you. This, of course, is arguably one of the most important issues we have, and I agree that the sentiment culturally and societally, it is great that it is no longer taboo. It's something we can talk about, legislate on, and people will come forward when they are struggling. We do see still too many people, particularly the youth, kids in school, struggling so much coming out. And a lot of this has been not just shown a light on from the pandemic, but exacerbated by the pandemic. And I'd like to point out that a lot of this was due to the COVID measures that were in place the last 2.5 years. It was not the virus that closed schools and sent kids into their rooms by themselves in front of computer screens. It was the government that did that. So I'd like to start and point that out, that is what created the crisis that we're in now. As far as what we can do now, we need to make sure that we bring all of those stakeholders to the table. Whether it's clinicians going directly into schools, making sure that they meet them where they are at. We need to make sure we understand the breadth of the issue, because this isn't just any one thing. It isn't just, COVID or mental illness or anything. We also have the drug and opioid issue that's being brought in that's causing a lot of this as well, causing this really disease of depression, anxiety in youth and all people to grow in a negative way. We need to make sure that we are able to put people that are exploiting these individuals by selling drugs and proliferating that through our district as well. So we need to make sure that we seek out the root cause, as well as make sure that we have the ability to meet people where they are at, whether it's in a clinical environment, an educational environment, or wherever it may be. This definitely needs to be a top priority.
Okay. Would you like a rebuttal on that at all?
I agree.
Okay.
We now move to question 4. Recently, the Department of Housing and Community Development released its multifamily zoning requirements for Mbta communities. This requires Mbta communities to have at least one zoning district near a transit station where multifamily housing is permitted. Is this an effective method to begin to solve the housing and transportation issues experienced in our communities? Each candidate will have 3 minutes. Mr. Sweezy, you are first.
Thank you, Amy, for the question. This is critically important, and as I mentioned in my opening, working alongside so many volunteers at the municipal level, this is something that's talked about a lot. Serving on economic development, we've talked about this issue a lot as Hanson tries to develop around its own commuter line station. So it also connects with a previous point I made about stakeholders. A big issue I see with state government, and that most people see with state government, is they are really pontificating from on high a bit too much, excuse the vocabulary there, but they are not bringing everyone who is affected to the table to ask. The fact of the matter is, with already having affordable housing guidelines that most of the towns are not meeting in our district, that already need help, these one-size-fit-all cookie-cutter regulations saying, oh, every town, and I understand the MBTA zones are different already than 40B regulations, But we need to be able to work with the towns and see how they can create affordable housing from their own perspective. To just throw them to the wolves and say, okay, you need to meet your 10% or else we're going to side on the side of developers, which is what is happening in these committee meetings, regardless of what is said. It needs to be changed. We need to make sure that we can create affordable housing. Look, being a younger person, many of people I know are buying their first homes. They're getting out, graduating college, having kids, and expanding. Everyone, we need to work to create affordable housing. Nobody that is coming in good faith is against affordable housing. I want everyone to be able to afford their own home, and I guarantee that I will work towards that end as well. But we cannot have the ends justify the means. And what we're doing is we are hurting our municipalities, we're siding on the side of developers, and I understand the goal, but it needs to be done in a holistic way with all the stakeholders at the table. And I promise to be an advocate for my towns, not developers, and make sure I talk to them and see what they need and how we can accomplish these goals of reaching affordable housing in all of our municipalities.
Thank you. Representative Cutler, you will have 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Would
you
like
repeat
me
the
to?
question? I think because we've got a little
Absolutely. Recently, the Department of Housing and Community Development released its multi-family zoning requirements for MBTA communities. This requires MBTA communities to have at least one zoning district near a transit station where multifamily housing is permitted. Is this an effective method to begin to solve the housing and transportation issues experienced in our communities?
Great. Well, so thank you for that. And the short answer is yes, and I want to back up. I think this is where my experience, both in the state government, but also I've been a planning board member. I've worked with local government, looking at the wrong camera, really comes into play. So let me just back up, because we're really in a housing crisis. We have an acute need for more starter homes, for more workforce housing, for more options for our seniors to age in place. We want young people to be able to move back home when they want to. We want people who, once they get older, to be able to downsize and stay in place. And if you look at the numbers, overall, our housing production is way down. If you compare the past 30 years to the 30 years before that, we've permitted half as many housing units as we had in the prior amount of time. So what's being done? Well, a lot is being done. First, again, we're going to talk at the state level and then come back and bring it home. In 2018, we passed a housing bond bill, which was the largest in state history for housing production and preservation. During the pandemic, we created an eviction diversion program to make sure people weren't losing their homes. Our ARPA package that we passed included $500 million for first-time homebuyers assistance, affordable rental units, and supportive housing. The economic development bill that we did in the first year of the cycle this session included some zoning reforms to reduce the threshold for zoning changes that promote housing production from 2/3 to a majority. It also included extra funds, $50 million for transit-oriented developments to produce new mixed-unit housing near major transit, and $50 million for neighborhood stabilization to turn blighted or vacant units back into productive use. So in terms of the new multifamily zoning, the idea is to encourage new multifamily housing in walkable neighborhoods that are close to transit. It's not just good housing policy, it's also good climate and transportation policy. And every town in my district is included in this new multifamily zoning regulation because we either have MBTA service or adjacent to an MBTA town. So there's some misconceptions I just want to clear up because a couple things that were said that aren't quite accurate. Number one, this has nothing to do with 40B. Nothing would exempt local zoning laws. Any kind of development would still have to meet local approval. There's no bypass as there is with 40B. And I'm very familiar with 40B, having served on the planning board for 4 years and been in office for a period of time and worked with many neighborhood groups in some cases in opposition to 40Bs when they weren't appropriate for the neighborhood. But there's no mandate to build or to produce new units with this regulation that you're talking about. It's about creating capacity for future use. And so again, I've served on the planning board, on the select board. I have experience with this at the state and the local level. I've done land use work as an attorney. I'm chair of the Labor and Workforce Development Committee. We clearly need more workers, and if they can't live near where they work, it's not going to help. So we passed this bill. The next step is to take steps to implement that. I know my time is up, but if we're elected, I'll be able to use my experience to help our towns move forward and comply with this new regulation and build more housing because we need it. Sorry.
Do we want to do a rebuttal on this? And let me just ask, when you do your rebuttal, it's still not really understood, I think, by a lot of people. Is this a mandate? Do the towns that have MBTAs have to do this? And if so, if they refuse, what is their option, or do they have any options? So we'll start with you.
Yeah, so this is, as mentioned, trying to promote affordable housing, particularly in the half mile or the mile around these MBTA zones. The issue that I have with a lot of these regulations is a lot of what I already talked about my first time is lack of having stakeholders, lack of having the interest of the town at heart. And we already talked about water resources and other resources. What's going to happen with the increased calls for service to police, fire, and EMS? What's going to happen to our schools with an influx of students? What's going to happen to our water infrastructure and the water table, our surface water, when we increase? It's, again, affordable housing is a must. We must work with our towns to make sure that we can do this in a way that does not negatively affect their budgets if they're not going to end up taking in the revenue needed to make this a successful program, because everybody having less services is not a good solution, even if there are more affordable housing. So we need to make sure there's a holistic solution going forward.
Representative Cutler.
So I think it's important not to conflate two different things: affordable housing in Chapter 40B and this multifamily housing bylaw, which is now in place. There's no mandate in the sense of there's no mandate to create any housing. This is about creating an overlay district. So they're finding a place in the community where someone could build multifamily housing if they went through all the steps that anyone would have to go through to build new housing. It's really all it is. It's an encouragement to do that. The only hook for cities and towns is that if they choose not to participate, they're not eligible for certain state grants. So it's really not a mandate. And I think, I have been in meetings with our local town planners, our local select board members, and done the legwork on the ground. In fact, I hosted a Zoom session with folks from the Economic Development Office and my local town elected leaders, because I knew there were a lot of concerns. I wanted to bring people together to kind of air it all out. And I think when you look at the details of it, there's some scary things that have been said, but I think if you look at the details, it's much more reasonable and much more achievable, and I think it is an important step, because again, we need more housing. How do we do that? We don't want to build tons of new big, McMansions. We want to be smart about this and have, in-law apartments and multifamily housing, and I'm running out of time.
Yeah,
so
that's your time.
Thank you.
Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, just very briefly, I'd like to point out that small hook is not so small. You see it at the federal level and you see it at the state level. When they say not eligible for grants, not eligible for money, of course it's not a mandate. They don't have to use the word, but it is coercion into our municipalities trying to do what they do want.
Yeah, I think so. Again, it's not quite accurate. There's opinions and there's facts. I think what this does is tell communities to create an overlay district. That's all it does. It's not telling communities that they have to build multifamily housing. That's certainly not the law. And I encourage anyone who has any concerns to talk to their local elected officials, planning board members, or feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk further.
All right. Now each candidate is going to have the opportunity to ask their opponent a question. We ask that you limit your question to 1 minute and that the response is limited to 2. The moderators here will reserve the right to ask follow-up questions. We're going to start this time with Representative Cutler. What is your question for Mr. Sweezy?
I don't actually have any questions for Mr. Sweeney. I'm good.
You don't, okay.
No.
Mr. Sweezy, you have 1 minute to ask Representative Cutler any question you'd like.
Yeah, sure. What I would ask Representative Cutler, and I know we already touched on ballot question number 4 a little bit, but actually during your WATD forum in 2020, you said in no uncertain terms at minute 44, for anyone who'd like to look it up, that you did not and would not support driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants that are in Massachusetts. So I would just like to ask if you were mischaracterizing your opinion in 2020, or if you were just having to buckle to what the speaker wanted and the majority party wanted.
Well, thank you for the question. I think it's pretty. The differences are pretty apparent when you hear the two candidates here. In terms of this issue about driver's licenses, so it's true that the ballot question is different than legislation that was done in the past, and I didn't support that in the past because I didn't feel that the identification requirements were strict enough. And in response to that, the proponents made changes. They stiffened those requirements and required 2 forms of identification, including a passport and a secondary form of ID. And so because I responded to that and addressed the concern that I had, I felt comfortable supporting it. But I'm not alone, okay? There's a lot of law enforcement experts that are also now supporting this. And so, are the Massachusetts District Attorneys Association, are they wrong? Are the Massachusetts Major City Chiefs of Police wrong? Are the majority of our sheriffs wrong? Is our Attorney General wrong? The answer is no. This is about public safety. It's about making our roads safer, and that's the bottom line. And I would just ask folks to do your own research. Don't fall for the scare tactics. I'm very comfortable that this is a positive step for Massachusetts now, and I think it's a good ballot question. I urge you to vote yes.
Okay.
Candidates, we are now going to give you 3 minutes for closing remarks. Feel free to speak directly to the camera to address your voters and constituents. Mr. Sweezy, you are first.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate thank you again to everyone at WATD, my opponent, Julie, and Amy. Thank you for the time and for all the viewers watching right now. I will start by saying, of course, you see some glaring policy differences between myself and my opponent, which I think we come generally in good faith, and having disagreements is healthy for the political process. But what might be more subtle, and what I hope you don't miss, is that we have some very key philosophical differences about government. My opponent believes that unabashedly government is always the answer to your problems. And I disagree with that. Government in itself should be there to help you. There should be social safety nets, there should be grants, there should be funding, there should be taxes, of course, in the right situation. But government very often is the problem. In no uncertain terms, you felt it yourself the last 2 years when the government trampled on individual freedoms and liberties, when they closed schools, closed businesses, when they put masks on your kids far past the need for them. The government, of course, is not an all-knowing foreign entity. It is made up of people. It is made up of politicians like my opponent. So I ask you, do you feel in the last 2 years that the government has helped you? Do you feel that your life has been made better the past 2 to 10 years? In his closing remarks during the PAC TV forum 2 years ago, Representative Cutler said he was running for re-election to make sure that this district was a better place to live, work, and raise a family. Do you think he succeeded? I hear a resounding no. And that is not rhetoric. I have knocked on over 3,000 doors and had volunteers do another 1,000. We've heard it from you, the voter, the viewer, at your doorstep, as you told us the plethora of issues that face our district and face you as individuals. I have sent out thousands of letters, receiving some heartbreaking replies. People that send back letters anonymously because they were embarrassed that they were not able to financially contribute and say they could only send their prayers, which I much appreciated and think the campaign runs on just as well. Lastly, if you look at the Office of Campaign and Political Finance Report, the office that records who is funding these campaigns, only 37% of my opponent's money comes from the towns of Duxbury, Pembroke, Hanson, Halifax, or Marshfield. 37%, where mine is over half at 53%, and I am extremely proud of that. Only 74%, less than 3/4, come from individuals. Much of the rest come from union PACs, 3 of which are even registered in the state of New York. 98% of my contributions have come from individuals, not PACs and organizations. So I ask you again, do you believe that people think Mr. Cutler has made this district a better place to live, work, and raise a family? Because I believe it is no. And I ask you to vote for me on or before November 8th. Thank you.
Representative Cutler?
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Julie and Amy and PAC TV, and thank you to my opponent for a spirited discussion. I think he's chosen to focus on me and a lot of negative things. I'm going to take the high road here and tell you that it's been my greatest professional honor to serve as your state representative. Working together, we've gotten a lot done. It's no doubt over the past 2 years, we've had a lot of challenges to overcome, but meeting these challenges and working to solve problems is what motivates me every day. And while things in Washington may seem hopelessly divided, here in Massachusetts, we found a better way. We work together to solve problems and find solutions. That's the same philosophy I bring to my work. My mom is a Democrat, and my dad was a Republican, and they both believed in the value of public service and hard work. And they taught me that fixing the problem is more important than fixing the blame. It's been a successful formula. As your state representative, I've worked to secure a record level of funding for our communities and delivered resources to help our schools, our seniors, and our small businesses. I helped pass a major new mental health bill, fought for new employee paid sick leave benefits, advanced legislation to combat worker wage theft, increased funding for our career centers and programs to attract and retain our early child care workforce. Just as important as these issues are the hundreds of our neighbors my team and I have been able to help in their time of need. After all, helping people and solving their problems is what this job is really all about. I'm running for re-election because I want to continue to use my experience solving problems to help us move forward. I bring my background as a small business owner, as an attorney, as a parent, as a local elected official to this job. But I also bring a track record of successfully working across the aisle developing strong relationships with Governor Baker and his team, Attorney General Healy and her fantastic staff, and my colleagues in both the House and the Senate. The South Shore is my home. It's your home. We love it here because of the natural beauty, the historic charm, great schools, the vibrant business community. It's where I grew up and where my kids are growing up today, and every day I work hard to make sure it continues to be a great place to live, work, and raise a family. I love my job and would be honored to earn your vote to continue this work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both very much for participating in this forum. We wish you both the best of luck throughout your campaign and in the election. For our viewers, thank you for joining us. If you want to watch this forum again, please visit pactv.org/elections for replay times on PAC TV's channels and on YouTube. And please make your choices heard by voting in the general election on Tuesday, November 8th. Thank you and good day.